The South African Union of Students is worried about gaps in the country's education system. The union says there's a disconnect between basic education outputs and the demands of higher education. They want government to restructure the education system in line with the needs and aspirations of a developmental state. To discuss this further, I'm joined by spokesperson for the organisation, Asive Dlanjwa, who joins us virtually from Welkom. Asive, thank you so much for your time. There's very important points that your union organisation is making. As the celebrations die down of those very important matric results and students now get those confirmation papers for applications to the tertiary education institutions they've decided on, and then the hard work and reality really sets in. And your union is making the point that what matriculants would have experienced up until that certain point in traditional classrooms has not really probably fully prepared them for whatever they're to face in the lecture halls of the tertiary institutions they're about to enter.
Thank you very much, and also greetings to your viewers. You could not be more correct. We think we're dealing with a two-pronged problem. I think the first one, obviously, is the issue of capacity. The reality is that there's a misalignment and an incongruence between basic education and higher education. The first level of incongruence is the fact that we are, like, for instance, we've got over 780,000 students who qualify to go to institutions of higher learning, but we've got just less than 200,000 spaces to accommodate those students. That's what, obviously, that tells us, firstly, we've got an issue of capacity. But also the second problem that we are having is that, yes, we have done well in terms of broadening access for the majority of South Africans, and particularly from the poor and the working class households. But the question we must ask ourselves is, to what extent? Because the students whom we've been able to get into the system, the reality is that the majority of them outside, when they come through the system, they have been capacitated in skills that are incongruent with the socio-economic needs of South Africa. So in terms of trying to build a developmental state, we obviously are going to have to align basic education and higher education much better. How do we align it? One, we need to increase capacity, number one. Number two, we need to say that, firstly, the training, or rather the education that students or learners are receiving in basic education must speak to and align to that which they're going to do in university and colleges. And that which they do in universities and colleges must align with that which we want to achieve in terms of building a developmental stage. So really, it's three stages that which we are saying that unless we're able to deal with those things, we are going to carry on to have a problem.
But where do you think practically the change should come? Should universities be changing the curriculum that they offer? For instance, you're either deciding to go in the science field or humanities, or you're doing a BCom or a BA that will, encourage critical thinking. And then once you've decided what postgrad you want to do, then you can decide about jobs. That's not really what our country and the economy that we find ourselves with at the moment needs right now, do we? I mean, we do need a little bit more focus on sought-after skills, as it were. Where do you think the change should be made?
I think we must not start. With saying what are the types of qualification that we are having or that we want to see. We must start by saying what are the developmental imperatives and priorities of our country. Also, secondly, what are we endowed in as a country? What are our strengths as a country? And what could we best use to build a developmental state? Once we have answered those questions, we must then relook at the whole value chain of education and say, for instance, in basic education, you see, when you have a quality education system, it means that if at any point students were to leave the system, and particularly after grade 8, we must know that they have been capacitated to be able to respond to a certain level to the socio-economic needs of the country. Meaning, even someone who lives at grade 9, you can't leave school in grade 12, grade 11, grade 10, grade 9, after having spent so many years in education. We've invested thousands of rands in you, and you have absolutely nothing to contribute towards the development of the country. So once we have determined where we want to go, we must then inculcate that into the curriculum from ECD all the way up to grade 12. Then we will know that, firstly, Because the reality of the matter is that 60% of learners that would start in grade R will not make it out of grade 12. So meaning, across the whole value chain, let us be able to inculcate the values and the imperatives of where we see the country going, number one. Number two, we obviously cannot understress the importance of investing in STEM, in science, technology, and mathematics in basic education, because we know that most of the critical skills towards the growth of the country lie in science and innovation. And therefore, obviously, we need to broaden that. I think as a country, we have one of the weakest maths and science capabilities, not because our learners are weak, but because our system is not geared to train them in mathematics and science. Thirdly, when we get institutions of higher learning, we need to do a complete overhaul of those. The reality is this: the majority of courses that are offered in institutions of higher learning, sorry to say this, but they are useless. They are absolutely useless in terms of responding to the needs of the country. We are spending an average of 100 to 250,000 per degree over 3 years to 4 years per student. For what? We are spending 164 billion rand per annum in the sector, but we are not seeing those dividends when it comes to the socio-economic growth of the country. So it's the whole value chain that we must look at, from basic education, and we must note that education, the success of education will not be determined by one wearing a mortarboard. The success of our education means at every level, if someone is in grade 5, we must know that they have been endowed with certain skills and certain understanding such that they are able to appreciate and be able to participate towards building a development. One would say this does not make sense. Take GP, for instance. GPV is one of the biggest underminers towards building a developmental state. So when students or learners are in grade 6 or grade 5, when they go home, they are not even equipped with the necessary know-how to be able to deal and respond to issues of GPV. I'm using GPV as alone because people think we must only skill our people in terms of industry skills to be able to build a developmental state. But it's a whole value chain because we want holistic socio-economic growth.
Okay, we've run out of time, but thank you so much. A very important topic, I'm not sure, something that we'll be looking back at all the time, especially as we do know that there are some curriculum changes being instituted by basic education and higher education coming up. That's South African Union of Students spokesperson Asive Dlanjwa joining us virtually there from Welkom. We thank him for his time.